Okay, let's unpack this. What we see is not merely what is there. It is what our brain constructs from experience, expectation, and emotion. Wow. That quote, it really hits you, doesn't it?
It really does. It's a fantastic summary.
Yeah, it's like our brains are, I don't know, magicians or something, constantly shaping this world we think we're just, observing.
That's a great way to put it, a powerful analogy. And it gets right to the heart of what we're diving into today.
Right.
Forget reality being like some straightforward TV broadcast. It's much more like a dynamic remix, always being tweaked, tailored by our own minds. So today we're really plunging into how our brains actually pull this off, using everything, really past experiences, how we're feeling right now.
Right. You shared some amazing source material, and that core message is it's undeniable. Perception isn't passive. Not at all. It's this active, construction project constantly happening inside our heads.
Exactly.
So if anyone listening has ever wondered, why they remember something totally differently from a friend, or if you're just fascinated by how your own mind works, well, you're definitely in the right place.
Hope so.
We're going to try and break down the machinery of perception, look at the brain as this master builder.
Yeah, architect.
And uncover how our feelings, what we expect, how that can literally bend reality. We'll even touch on the social side, how we kind of build reality together.
And crucially, maybe some ways to manage it a bit better.
Yes. Some practical ways to maybe take a bit more control, which sounds pretty empowering.
It is. It's about understanding that essentially each of us lives in our own unique perceptual bubble.
A bubble.
And learning how that bubble gets formed, well, that can be incredibly useful.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's start there. This idea that perception is more than meets the eye. It's not just our senses acting like cameras just recording.
No, not at all. Not even close, really. Imagine your brain as, say, a really smart film editor.
Okay.
It gets all this raw footage from your senses, sight, sound, touch, everything, but it doesn't just play it back. It actively picks scenes, cuts them together, adds its own soundtrack, fills in missing bits to make a coherent story.
So the final movie is perception.
That's your perception, exactly. It's constantly trying to make sense of this just by a barrage of sensory info, looking for patterns, imposing structure, sometimes even when it's not clearly there.
Which must be why those optical illusions, the really crazy ones, why they mess with our heads so much, they expose the brain's shortcuts.
Precisely. Think about the classic Necker cube. That simple wireframe cube.
Yeah, the one that flips back and forth.
That's the one. The actual pattern of light hitting your eye, that hasn't changed at all. But your brain keeps offering up different ways to see it, different constructions. It's flipping between interpretations.
So it's not a bug, it's a feature.
Kind of, yeah. It's demonstrating how our brains actively try to create a stable, understandable world, even from ambiguous input. It shows that what we consciously see isn't just the raw data, it's the result of these super fast internal calculations, these rules the brain's learned.
Rules for, turning flat images from our eyes into a 3D world.
Exactly.
Right.
Building that three-dimensional experience from two-dimensional retinal images.
Okay, so it's this constant, interplay. You've got the raw sensory stuff flooding in. Then the brain is digging through its huge library of past experiences, knowledge, trying to match it up.
Right, integrating it.
And then our current mood, or what we expect to see, that acts as a sort of decider, especially when things are ambiguous.
That's a fantastic way to visualize it. You've got the initial signals, then this incredible cognitive processing engine comparing that data to everything it knows.
Okay.
And finally, your expectations, your emotional state, they act like powerful filters. They influence which interpretation gets prioritized and ultimately what pops into your conscious awareness.
Okay, so the brain isn't just passively soaking things up. It's this tireless architect constantly building our reality from bits and pieces using blueprints from the past.
Exactly. Tireless architect is good. Or think of it as a prediction machine.
Prediction. How so?
Well, your brain is constantly making hypotheses, basically educated guesses, about what's causing the sensory input it's receiving.
Okay.
It compares those predictions to the actual input, and if there's a mismatch, what scientists call prediction error, it updates its internal model.
So it's not just reacting, it's predicting and then correcting.
Exactly. It's actively anticipating and trying to explain the world around you. Very efficient.
So when things are unclear, maybe there are multiple ways to see something, the brain just makes its best guess, goes with what's most probable based on its existing model.
That's a very good way to put it. Faced with ambiguity, it doesn't just freeze. It selects the interpretation that fits best with past experience and the current context. It's usually right.
Usually helpful, yeah.
Which is why we can navigate the world so quickly. But this reliance on prediction, that's also where these cognitive biases can slip in.
Ah, right. Those systematic errors in thinking.
Exactly. Those patterns where we deviate from, purely rational judgment.
Like wishful seeing. I loved that term from the sources. It sounds like what we want to be true actually bends what we perceive. Tell me more about that.
Wishful seeing is a perfect example. It shows how deeply tangled our desires and perceptions really are. There was this fascinating study. Researchers showed participants who were hungry, blurry images. These could be seen as food or just neutral objects.
Okay.
The hungrier people were significantly more likely to see the ambiguous shapes as food.
Wow. So it wasn't just wishful thinking, it was wishful seeing.
Exactly. Their brains literally processed the visual info differently, making the food interpretation more likely because they desired it. Desire primes the system.
So if I'm really, really craving coffee, I might actually be more likely to mistake a blurry sign for a coffee shop sign.
Precisely. Your brain, primed by that craving, is sort of on the lookout for coffee-related cues. It might resolve ambiguity in favor of coffee shop.
That's wild.
And what's really remarkable tying into this is that neuroimaging studies looking at brain activity show that similar brain regions light up during actual seeing and when we vividly imagine things.
Way.
Yes. So that line between really seeing something and just imagining it, it seems much blurrier than we usually assume. It supports this whole idea of perception as an active construction, heavily influenced by our internal states.
Okay, so our emotions, our expectations, they're not just like adding flavor after the fact. They're part of the recipe from the start. They're actively shaping what we even perceive.
That's exactly.
It makes total sense then. If I'm feeling really good, upbeat, the world might literally look brighter, more full of possibilities. Whereas if I'm anxious, I might be hyper alert, seeing potential dangers everywhere.
Exactly right. Our emotional state is like this powerful filter. It changes what we pay attention to, how we interpret things. Positive emotions tend to broaden our focus.
Make us more open.
Yeah, more open to new information, opportunities. Negative emotions, conversely, tend to narrow our focus, making us more vigilant for threats.
Which makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint, I guess. For survival.
Absolutely. It's adaptive, but it does mean our subjective reality is constantly being tweaked by how we feel.
And then there are expectations, these like mental shortcuts built from our past, our culture, what people tell us. And you mentioned confirmation bias. That's basically seeing what we already believe, right?
Precisely. Confirmation bias it's incredibly powerful and really common. It's this tendency to seek out, interpret, and remember information that just confirms what we already think. And at the same time, we tend to downplay, ignore, or forget information that contradicts our beliefs.
So our brains are like lawyers, constantly building a case for their existing theories.
That's a great analogy. Even if the evidence is shaky or ambiguous, it can create these echo chambers right inside our own heads, reinforcing beliefs, sometimes regardless of objective facts.
So, okay, if I'm convinced, say, that a certain brand of car is unreliable, I'm going to notice every single time one breaks down, and I'll probably just ignore or forget all the ones running perfectly fine.
Exactly. That's confirmation bias in action. And it's not just about cars, of course. It massively impacts our social lives.
How so?
Well, imagine you go into a meeting expecting a particular colleague to be difficult or uncooperative.
Okay.
You might then interpret their perfectly neutral comments as hostile or find fault with their suggestions just because it fits your expectation.
And then that reinforces the belief.
Right. And worse, it can lead you to act defensively or cautiously towards them.
Which might actually cause them to become difficult in response.
Exactly. Creating a self-fulfilling prophecy, all driven by that initial biased perception.
Oh, it's almost like we're not just perceiving reality, we're kind of co-creating it, especially with other people.
That's a perfect transition.
Which brings us to the social side of this. It's not just individual brains working alone.
Absolutely not. Our social world is maybe the clearest example of how reality is often this shared, co-constructed thing. Think about any group of people witnessing the same event, a concert, a political debate, even just a casual chat down the pub.
Yeah.
Social psychology research shows again and again that people in that group can walk away with wildly different understandings of what happened.
Even though they saw the same thing.
Saw and heard the same raw input, yes.
Yeah.
But factors like their personal biases, their role in the group, the social norms at play, all these things shape their individual perception and memory of the event.
And you brought up the dress again in the notes. Still such a mind-bending example. Seems trivial maybe, but it blew up online.
It did. The dress from 2015,
Yeah.
it's just such a clear, relatable illustration of how dramatically individual perception can diverge, even with the exact same visual input.
Right, black and blue versus white and gold.
Exactly. The actual light hitting everyone's screens was the same, but the internet was fiercely divided. And it wasn't just, slightly different shades. It was fundamental. Black versus white.
Yeah.
Blue versus gold.
So what was the explanation again? Something about lighting?
Yeah, the prevailing theory is it relates to how our brains unconsciously correct for lighting conditions. Based on our individual past experiences with different types of light, daylight versus artificial light, our brains made different assumptions about the illumination in the photo.
Ah.
So some brains essentially subtracted blue light, seeing white and gold. Others subtracted yellow-gold light, ending up with black and blue.
It really just hammers home how much our individual history, maybe even our biology, shapes what we literally see, doesn't it?
It really does.
And how easily we can end up in totally different subjective realities, even looking at the same photo.
Precisely. Our assumptions, often totally unconscious, baked in by culture and experience, they act like powerful lenses. And when those lenses differ, like with the lighting assumptions for the dress, you get these seemingly irreconcilable differences in perception.
Which has huge implications for, well, everything. Communication, arguments.
Absolutely. How we understand each other, how we approach disagreements. It's all tied up in this.
Okay, so knowing all this, knowing perception is constructed, often biased, are we just stuck? Are we just puppets of our own brains? Or can we actually, grab the steering wheel a bit?
That's the really exciting part, the empowering part of understanding this. No, we're not just passive victims of our perception.
Good.
Once we become aware of the factors that can systematically, warp our view, we can start using strategies to adjust those internal filters.
Right.
It's about cultivating what psychologists call metacognitive awareness, basically, thinking about our own thinking.
Right, becoming aware of the process itself.
Exactly. And learning to exercise some conscious influence over how we process information.
Okay, so what are some practical ways to do that? How can we harness this power of perception? You mentioned a few techniques.
Yes, several practical approaches we can weave into daily life. One that's incredibly valuable is mindfulness practice.
Okay, mindfulness.
Yeah.
How does that help with perception specifically?
Well, by intentionally focusing your attention on the present moment, what you're seeing, hearing, feeling, thinking, without judging it, you become more attuned to your immediate experience and your own internal reactions as they happen. This awareness lets you sort of catch your automatic biases in action.
Ah, so you can see them before they completely take over.
Exactly. It creates a little bit of space,
Yeah.
space to observe things more clearly, rather than being instantly swept away by your assumptions or emotional reactions.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like creating a pause button between stimulus and response.
Okay, what's another strategy?
Another really powerful one is cognitive reappraisal.
Cognitive reappraisal, okay. This means consciously examining and, importantly, challenging your initial interpretations, especially when you have a strong, maybe negative emotional reaction.
So questioning that first gut reaction.
Precisely. Deliberately asking yourself, okay, hang on. Is there another way to look at this situation? This active effort to consider alternatives can really lessen the grip of negative feelings or expectations. It lets you reframe things more constructively.
You give an example?
Sure. Say you get a really brief, maybe terse email from someone. Your immediate thought might be, oh no, they're angry with me.
Yeah, happens all the time.
Cognitive reappraisal would involve stopping, noticing that thought, and then actively thinking, okay, what else could it be? Maybe they're just super busy. Maybe that's just their communication style. Maybe they're stressed about something totally unrelated.
Right. Actively generating other possibilities instead of latching on to the first negative one. That sounds incredibly useful. Okay, strategy 3.
A third vital one is actively seeking out diverse perspectives.
Stepping outside our bubble.
Exactly. Making a real effort to engage with people who see things differently, and not just to argue, but to genuinely listen to their reasoning.
Why is that so important?
Because it directly challenges our own assumptions. It forces us to confront evidence or arguments we might otherwise ignore because of, say, confirmation bias.
Mm-hmm.
It requires a bit of intellectual humility, being open to the idea that maybe we don't have the full picture, but it enriches our understanding immensely.
That can definitely be tough.
Yeah.
Especially on issues we feel strongly about. But I see the value. Okay, and the last strategy you mentioned was about emotions.
Yes, cultivating emotional awareness. This ties back to what we discussed earlier. Our mood profoundly affects our perception.
Right.
So becoming more aware of our own emotional state in the moment helps us recognize when our perceptions might be colored by those feelings.
So if I know I'm feeling anxious, I can be more cautious about interpreting things negatively.
Exactly. If you're feeling down or stressed, you might be more likely to interpret ambiguous signals as hostile or critical. Recognizing, okay, I'm feeling anxious right now, maybe that's affecting how I'm seeing this interaction, allows you to consciously try to consider alternative, less threat-focused interpretations.
It's like putting a little asterisk next to your perceptions when you know you're in a strong emotional state.
That's a great way to think about it, acknowledging that our feelings are filters and trying to compensate for them.
So, okay, this whole understanding that our reality is partly a mental creation, it's not just like some cool philosophical idea. It has real, tangible consequences for how we live day to day.
Absolutely. It touches everything. From small personal choices to how we form opinions on big social or political issues.
How does it help in relationships, for instance?
Well, understanding the subjectivity of perception can foster huge amounts of empathy. When someone sees things very differently from you, instead of immediately thinking they're wrong or irrational, you might think, okay, their experiences, their biases, their emotional state must be shaping their view differently from mine.
It allows for more understanding, less judgment maybe.
Exactly. It helps appreciate that different viewpoints often stem from different constructed realities based on different inputs and interpretations.
And in work settings, professional life.
Hmm.
I can see this being huge for negotiation or conflict resolution.
Oh, definitely. In teams, collaboration.
Yeah.
If people realize everyone might be perceiving the same project goals or the same problems slightly differently,
Yeah.
it encourages clearer communication. It encourages actively trying to understand the other person's perspective, being aware of your own potential biases, seeking out counterarguments, being willing to revise your view. It leads to much better collaboration and problem solving.
Moving beyond just defending our own little constructed reality.
Precisely. Towards finding common ground and building a shared understanding.
So wrapping this up then, the big takeaway really seems to be that the reality we experience, it's not just a simple snapshot of the outside world.
Not at all.
It's this active construction project happening in our brains. An intricate mix of sensory data, yes, but also our unique personal history, our feelings right now, the cultural context we're swimming in.
That sums it up perfectly. It's a blend.
And realizing that is, well, you said it, it's both humbling.
Yeah, it reminds us our view isn't the only one, and it's fallible.
And also really empowering.
Because it suggests we can become more aware. We can learn to question our assumptions, refine our filters, and consciously shape our understanding. We have agency.
So whether we're facing some ambiguity, maybe navigating a disagreement, or just trying to figure out why we reacted strongly to something, it's worth remembering our brain isn't just passively receiving, it's actively building.
Indeed. Recognizing that dynamic, constructive nature of perception and our potential role within it.
This has been incredibly illuminating, really fascinating stuff. So for everyone listening, maybe as you go about your day, especially if you find yourself in a situation where your view clashes with someone else's, or maybe when you're facing a big decision. Just take a moment. Ask yourself, how might my own perceptual biases, my own constructed reality, be influencing how I'm seeing this right now?
Yeah.
And what might happen if I made a conscious effort to try and see it from a different angle?
Yeah.
Definitely something to think about.